So in this video, we're going to be taking a look at the Empress card. And this is actually my birth card. It's a really special card to me. I relate a lot to this card, actually. I think that it says a lot, and I try to spend time thinking about this card. So I took a lot of time to reflect on it before doing this video, and a lot came to me. So she has a crown on her head, and that crown is a symbol of authority. But on that crown, there are these stars. And those stars represent patterns. So you have different patterns that she can focus on: the months of the year, the zodiac, the constellations, the seasons, life, death, and rebirth. All these things are patterns that she can use in the physical world to connect us to and bridge the gap between the physical and the spiritual world. So she kind of serves as a bridge between those two things. And that's because she is a combination of a lot of really important energies. And we'll talk about that as we move forward. But I think that she is a very intelligent person because there's a lot of yellow right behind her head in the background of this card. And to me, yellow is, of course, connected to the sign of air, swords, which is the mind, intellect. And she's very good at analyzing the physical world in detail. I love on the Science Tarot how it connects to Gregor Mendel, who was a monk, and he studied pea plants over many generations. And he looked at different patterns in the plants in order to give us information about genetics. And he was known as the father of genetics. But one of the interesting things about Gregor Mendel was his ability to take detailed notes and to really care for and nurture all of the plants that he took care of. And that's an important aspect of the Empress card because she doesn't study the physical world just to study it. She studies it because she loves the physical world and she wants to share information that will help the physical world bridge that gap between the physical and the spiritual. So that's her goal, that's her will, that's her true purpose. So I love that aspect of this card. I think that if you were to talk to the Empress card, she would be able to talk to you about biology, genetics, physics, chemistry, all of these things. And she would be able to show you how that connects to the spiritual world as well. And that's a sacrifice because it puts her out there and it makes her kind of vulnerable to some of the more logical perspectives that exist in the physical world. But she's willing to make that sacrifice. If you look at the Thoth deck, you can see that there's a swan or a pelican there, depending on which deck you look at, and it's stabbing at its heart. And the blood that's coming from its heart is a sacrifice of the heart to feed the offspring that are around it. And I find that that's just a beautiful symbol of love for everything. And this card is actually connected to the Hanged Man because if you look up your birth card, those two cards will be together as birth cards. And I find that that's really interesting because there's a lot of service to others that go into the Empress's path. She has a very nurturing personality. We can see that on this card. There are a lot of trees in the background. So she has this connection to earth, this really deep love for earth. And she also has wheat in the front. That's symbolic of abundance. And she also has these pomegranates on her garment, which are a symbolic of patterns as well. Abundance and patterns. So the pomegranate relates to Persephone, and Persephone was a goddess that had to go into the underworld and then return to the physical world. So that's symbolic of life, death, and rebirth. And she has a detailed understanding of all of that as well. Let's look at the Kabalistic tree of life and really bring some of these things together. Because on the Kabalistic tree of life, you can see that her pathway lies across the pathway of the high priestess. And it also connects to Sephiroth, Binah, and Shukma. And those pathways have keywords. They are wisdom and understanding. And so she takes the time to gain a lot of wisdom and understanding in order to provide that doorway to the spiritual world. And in fact, because she's the fourth card in the tarot, she's connected to the fourth letter of the Hebrew alphabet, which is Dalet, which means door. So she is a pathway. She is a door. She's also connected to the number 3 because she's the number 3 in tarot. And that's connected to the Hebrew word hemiel, which means camel. So she's connected to the high priestess. And you can see that her pathway intersects the high priestess as you go up the tree of life. So there's that connection there as well. But it goes further than that. If we look at the Hermetic Tarot, we can see that she's also connected to the magician. So on the bottom of this card, it says that she's the daughter of the mighty ones. So she's the daughter or the blend of the magician and the high priestess. So having the power to manifest in the physical world and understand the physical world, but also to go inward and find that true will and to find that love and that divine connection and spark in order to bring about things that are more of a beautiful nature in the physical world, something that's really out of love, right? If we look at the Hermetic Tarot again, we can see that there are scales here at the top. So those scales are related to the Justice card or to justice, which also crosses paths with the high priestess as you go up the Kabalistic tree of life. So why is that the case? Let's take a look at the tree of life and let's look at everything that crosses the path of the high priestess as you follow the path of the high priestess, which is called the path of the camel, up that tree. So the first thing you cross is the tower. And you might be thinking, well, wow, okay, that's not good. But actually it is. You cross the tower before everything is because as soon as you start to go into your inner world, to connect with your divine spark, you have to break these elusive, these sort of illusions and patterns. And that is the destruction of that. That's what the tower card represents there. It's breaking down that old ego and subduing that to the point where you can access it, because otherwise you're gonna still have the veil. So that's a really important concept, and that should be the first thing. That's why that's that first pathway you have to cross. Then you can access the divine spark and head up the pathway. The other thing you have to access and pass is the Justice card, balancing the heart and the mind. You have to bring together polarities. That's why on the High Priestess card, you have those two pillars in the background. She's about bringing together polarities. And the Empress card has perfected that in the physical world. And that's why she's able to provide that example and that doorway to enter that. And so that's the next place we hit. I think that the New Orleans VooDoo Tarot in the book really does give us an explanation for this. And I love what it says. I was surprised by what it said, actually. So the card here is Iazan, which is about love, but it's also about the power of love and how that relates to the practice of voodoo. But if you look at the book, and I'll go ahead and read that to you and tell you what that's saying here. So it talks about the tree of life, and it says the paths or roads of Marie Laveau. So we're talking about the pathway up the tree of life, going through the high priestess, and Iazan intersect. So the Empress, I talked about how it intersects with the Empress, and you can see that here on the tree of life. And it says their purities blend, and it opens the door to the most suitable of realms, Azaluth. So we get to a realm where we have an archetypal realm that underlies all creation. So a higher realm that is a connection to spirit. And then on the Telezma Tarot, you also have an absolutely beautiful image. And so this image right here, I don't know if the artist intended this, but this card is connected to Venus. And you can see that she has the symbol of Venus on a lot of different cards and a lot of different decks. And this, to me, looks like Venus, but right at the abyss. And so what I mean by the abyss is if you go up the tree of life, right, you're going to get to a point where you hit the Empress, and right there's a dotted line. And the abyss is known as sort of a desert that we all have to cross. And that's why the animal used to cross it is the camel. And that's why you can see in the tree of life that the high priestess pathway is called the pathway of the camel. And so it's almost like you're on this camel and you run into this huge image of Venus, or this huge just archetype there waiting for you to impart this knowledge and wisdom and open the door to something amazing. And I think that that's just an amazing card. I really love that. Oh, actually, if we look at another card here that connects this to Venus, it would be from the Celestial Tarot. I really love this image of it. And we could talk about Venus a little bit because I think it's important to mention that here, because there are some aspects of this card, if you get it reversed, that do indicate certain things. And we have to be careful. So if we look at Venus here, Venus came from the ocean in a shell. And within shells, there are sometimes pearls. And we notice that on the Waite Smith deck, she's wearing this pearl necklace. So that's symbolic of like hidden nuggets of wisdom, but it's also symbolic of just this absolute beauty that exists within this world that we can focus on. So Venus, when she walked on land, she would amplify the beauty. Flowers would sprout, trees would grow, butterflies would come around. And if we look at the tarot of the Navigators of the Mystic Sea, we can kind of see that image. We see this being walking, and you see all these beautiful things coming from the land all around her. And it's just this dazzling, hypnotic image of a being. And we can focus on that. So what sometimes happens is, as human beings, we can get caught up in the dazzle of the physical world and lose perspective of the spiritual. And so you can see she's holding this thing, and it looks like it's sort of hypnotizing this swan here. And the swan is just focused on that and looking at that. And the reason why I bring that up is because there's a quote by Aleister Crowley, who is the co-creator of the Thoth deck. So him and Lady Frida Harris, Lady Frida Harris was the artist, but Aleister Crowley had this quote, and he basically says, love under will. And what does he mean by that? So love is a very powerful thing. And so that emotional side, it's like a waterfall of emotions sometimes, and it can be hard to control. You can see that on the RWS card, there's a waterfall in the background. So there is this emotion, energy in motion. It's hard to maintain our perspective when we're in the midst of all of that, and we can lose perspective. And so the reason why the quote is love under will is because sometimes we have to use our will to know what is right, to make that sacrifice, and to remember that it's service to other and not service to self. And there's that fine line between ourselves and what we want, and sometimes what's best for everyone. And that's why there's a little bit of an element of sacrifice on the Thoth deck with the pelican striking at its heart, because it can be painful. And there's things that you have to put yourself out there for in order to get past some of the illusions and things that we can get wrapped up in, even with the beauty of the physical world. So let's switch here and let's talk about the element that I want to talk about here. So I like to do a little bit of an alchemy with my tarot videos and look at the periodic table and use the elements in the order that they appear to just kind of fuse those things together and create a message. And so the element that lines up with, and that is the number 3 on the periodic table, is lithium. And lithium represents the Empress card. So lithium, really interesting, when according to scientific studies and what we know in science, there were 3 elements produced during the Big Bang. These were the only 3. Everything else came afterwards in supernovas, or just from things exploding and changing in different forms. But those 3 elements were hydrogen, helium, and lithium. And I think it's interesting that lithium was also included in that. It's a fusion between hydrogen and helium, but it's something that was the only physical thing produced at the very beginning. And so there's a lot of wisdom and understanding there contained within the atoms of lithium. Every atom of lithium that's here is an atom of lithium that's always been here. Matter can't be created nor destroyed. You can break them down to its smaller components, but unless you do some nuclear fission or fusion, you're not going to really change that. You can change them to different forms, but all of those components are still existing. And so I love on the physics tarot how it talks about propagation. And we have this point, and we have that wave of creation going throughout. So I thought that was a beautiful connection to the Empress card, and connecting that to lithium as I think about it. So lithium is also a very soft metal.
Group 1 metals tend to be relatively soft, and we can easily cut the metal with a knife. What we can do is we can see the shiny metallic surface underneath.
And it actually has a very low density, so it floats on water.
If we add a piece of lithium to the water, one of the things that we noticed is the fact that the lithium floats. Group 1 metals are less dense than water.
So I like to think of that as the energy of Venus, being able to float on that water and to produce a certain amount of beauty. It produces this beautiful red color. and it can be dazzling and beautiful to look at. We put it in our fireworks because we want to see those beautiful sparks. And I think that's something that we can all connect with and relate to. It's very healing. Lithium has a healing power to it. It's actually in the form of lithium carbonate, used to treat manic depression and also bipolar disorder. So right there, it's bringing together polarities. It sits in the middle of the tree of life, connecting Binah and Shukma to bring together different polarities. It's a combination of the mighty ones. So being able to bring those together is very vital to having balance. And on the Hexagonal Elements deck, we have that for lithium. So this one says lithium, and down here it says emotional stability. But on the other hand, lithium reacts violently with water.
We also see that the lithium reacts very rapidly with the water. This is a single displacement reaction producing hydrogen gas and lithium hydroxide.
So if we allow those emotions to consume us and to be consumed by the beauty of the physical world, then there can be this reaction. And that's why we have to maintain love under will. So my name is Will. Thank you for watching Atypical Tarot. I'll see you next time.